The definition of the model varies depending upon who you talk to. Some developers think that the model is a conglomeration of everything that is not a controller or a view. And then you will find some other developers that think that the model is something else. And a lot of times, how we think of the model is determined by the platform that we are writing our application for. Now, I personally think of the model as primarily the classes that we use to represent the data that our application works with. Like, for example, we have this products controller, and the data that this products controller works with would be products. So the model that this controller will be retrieving and then sending to the view would be either an individual product or a collection of products. So let's write a class that's going to represent an individual product. We can do that by right-clicking on the models folder, and technically we could put this class anywhere that we wanted to, but the convention is inside of the models folder, thus the models namespace, and let's just call this product. Now, we need some pieces of information for an individual product. One of those is the ID. We also need the name, so that will be a string. We could also use the price. So let's create a decimal property called a price. And then we could also have a collection of categories. So we can make this an iList of category. And we, of course, don't have a category data type yet. And then we can call this property simply categories. And that would be basically everything that we would need for an individual product. Now let's go ahead and let's create this category class. So once again, let's add a new class to the models folder. Let's call it category. And we need the ID here, so let's make that an integer value. And then we need the name. And that will, of course, be a string. Now, in preparation for this lesson, I went ahead and created a data access layer. Now, I personally don't view the data access layer as part of the model. It's something that we can use to get the model, but at least from my mindset, I don't think of the data access layer as part of the model. And I have two interfaces and then a concrete repository. Let's just look at the concrete repository. We have a static list that contains a set of products. So we're not going to be doing anything by hitting a database. We're just going to be using with an in-memory collection. It's a whole lot easier to set this up than to set up a database table and do something that you also have to set up as well. So we have this data store called underscore products, and it contains, I believe, 6 products. I think there's 2 CPUs, 2 motherboards, and 2 products for memory. And as far as methods are concerned, we can get products by a given category. We can retrieve all of the products. We can see if any of them meet a particular criteria. We can get how many products we have in the data store. We can create or add a product to the repository and delete, find, and so on and so forth. So inside of our products controller, we want to use this repository class so that we can fulfill the user's request. So for the index action method, that is supposed to display all of our products. So we want to retrieve all of the products from our data access layer, and then we want to pass that data on to the view. So this will be the model that our controller is going to pass to the view. Let's first of all create a repository object. So we want to new up product repository. We will need a using statement for firstcontroller.data because that is where I put that repository class. And then we simply want to retrieve all of the products. Now we could create another variable called products or all products if we wanted to do that. But to make things simple, because I like to have clean and very thin controllers, I'm just going to call repo.all. That is going to retrieve all of the products within the repository and pass that to the view. Now, as it is right now, the index view is not expecting any data from the controller, but we can change that. Let's go to our views folder. Let's go to products, and then let's open up our index view. And at the top of this document, we want to use the @ sign followed by model with a lowercase m. And then we simply want to specify the data type of our model data. That is an iQueryable of firstcontroller.models.product. Now, if we add this firstcontrollers.model inside of our web config file, we will no longer have to specify that in any of our views. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's use an add element. We want to specify the namespace attribute and give it a value of firstController.models. So now we can get rid of firstController.models inside of our view, and we have just product, although this is not being registered, so we need to close that file. Let's open it back up. And now we have our firstController.models namespace being imported into our views. So now we have this model data. Well, how do we use it? We have a model property. And by specifying the data type for our model, this model property is strongly typed. If we look at IntelliSense, it says that this is an iQueryable of product. So we can change this for each loop. Instead of looping over this string, we can say var product in model, and then we want to pass the individual product to our partial view. And we do that by, first of all, specifying the name of the partial view, and then the model for that partial view, product in this case. Now, because we created this partial view not expecting any type of data, we need to change that. And we basically do the same thing. We go to the partial view page, we add an @model at the top, but here this is not an iQueryable of product. This is a product. And now instead of using this static content of product name and product price, we can use @model.name. And then for the price, we can use @model.price. And ideally, we would have some formatting for the price. But let's stop right here and let's run the application so that we can see what we get when we go to /products. Instead of having just the product name and product price that we did in the previous lesson, now we see that we have a totally awesome CPU for 250. We have an awesome motherboard for 250. We have a decent motherboard for 130, and so on and so forth. Now we can do the same thing for the action for showing the category. So let's go back to our controller, and inside of the show category action method, we first of all want to create a repository object. So let's just copy and paste that. And then we want to retrieve all of the products with the given category. So to the show category view, we could pass repo.getByCategory and then category. And that is going to send an iQueryable of product to the show category view. So we need to go to that view, and we need to make the same modification that we did to the index view. So let's just copy that one line of code, put that in there. And we can also do the same thing that we did inside of the index view. That is using a for each loop to iterate over our model and then displaying the individual products by passing in that product as the model for the partial view. So whenever we run the application and we go to products/CPU, we will see all of the products that are in the CPU category. And we have two of those, the totally awesome CPU and the mainstream CPU. We also have a motherboard category, so we can see all of the motherboards, and we also have a memory category. Now let's go back and let's write the code for an individual product. So we once again want to go to our products controller, and this is for the details action method. We first of all need to change the return type from string to action result, and we also want to call the view method, but of course we want to pass in an actual model to this view method, and that is going to be an individual product. So let's once again create a repository object, and let's retrieve the product by ID. So var product equals repo, and we want to use the find method, and we basically want to find the product that has the ID with our given ID. But that's not everything that we need to do here. We also need to check the category. So we can use an if statement, if product, and then categories. Then we can use the any method, and we want to see if any category has the given name. So we will say CName equals to category. If this is true, then we have a product within this given category, and we want to pass that product as the model to our view. Otherwise, that product does not exist. So we will return a new, I believe it's HTTP not found result. And that basically sends a 404 to the browser. Now we don't have a view for our details, so let's right click, let's add a view, and we want the name of this to be details. The template, let's change this to empty. Now, this is the difference between empty without model and empty. If we specify empty here, then we can say what the model class is going to be. And if we look at the drop down, we have product. That is our model. This is not going to be a partial view, but we are going to use the layout page. So we will just click on add. This is going to create a view that is automatically set to have a product as the model. And for the title of this page, let's not use details. Let's use the name of the product itself. So we can use model.name. And then for this H2 element, let's do the same thing. We will use @model.name. And in parentheses, we could use @model.price. Once again, we would want to format that, but we will leave that alone. Now, if we had a description, which in hindsight is something that we should probably have for all of our products. If we had a description, then we could have the description for the product goes here. But we don't need that as orphan text, so let's put that inside of a paragraph. And so whenever we go to the page for an individual product, we will see our details view. So we want to go to products and then CPU, and we no longer have a CPU with an ID of 11, which is what we have been using, but I do know that we have one with an ID of 1. So here we have our totally awesome CPU, and then we have the description for the product goes there, and the title is totally awesome CPU. Let's do one other thing in this lesson. Let's add a link both to our category page as well as the products page. And we will add a link for the name of our product so that whenever we click on the name, it's going to take us to the actual page for that product. And this is going to be relatively easy because both the index and the show category views use the same partial view. Now we can add a link in 3 different ways. We're going to look at just 2 of those in this lesson. The first is to use primarily pure HTML. So we can have an href, let's set that to /products, and then we want @model. And if I had designed this a little better, I would just have just a single category and not a list of categories, because now we have to use .first and then .name. And every one of our products has just one category. So this is going to work for us here. And then model.id. Then we need the text. So that will be model.name. And if we go back to the browser and refresh, we will now have a link for all of our products. So we can click on this first link, and there we have the product page for our totally awesome CPU. Now there's an issue with this approach, and it's really only going to show itself if you are deploying your application to something other than the root of your web server. Like for example, here we have a URL of our root, which is localhost, and then we have the path, products CPU, and then 1. Well, let's say that we are deploying the application to localhost, and then we have a my app folder, and then we have products.cpu.1. So our application is living within my app as opposed to the host. Well, by taking this approach for the URL, all of our URLs aren't going to work because we have /products that's going to generate a URL relative to the root of our website, and that is our root, localhost. So as far as development is concerned, all of our links are going to work, but whenever we deploy it, we're going to see the issue of the links not working because they should be going to /myapp and then /products and then so on and so forth. So we can get around this by using a method on our HTML helper object. So we want to use HTML, and then we have a method called route link. This generates a link based upon a route, and we have to supply it all of the information for a given route. So first we have this link text. So this will be model.name, and then we pass in an object that has all of our route information. So that would be controller, which would be products. Then we have the action, which will be details. And then we also have the category, which will be equal to our model.categories.first.name. And then the ID equal to model.id. and then we would have to close that object and then close the method. We could put this on multiple lines just so that we could see that a little bit better, but that's a lot that you have to do in order to generate a single link. But if we go back to the browser, let's go to our products page. We now have two links, but they are both pointing to the same resource. And that's exactly what we want. But this route link approach is much more flexible because it is going to generate a URL based upon the application itself. So whenever we deploy our application, and if it's living inside of my app off of the root, the URLs are going to work just fine. It definitely is a lot more typing involved, but you end up with much more flexible views. So that's basically how you can pass data to your view and how you can use that data inside of your view. And if you have a partial view, how you can pass data to the partial view. Well, in the next lesson, we are going to continue to look at models, but we're going to look at it in reverse order. We are going to accept model data from the browser. We will bind that to a model class, and we will even validate it as well.